YouTube family, we're back again with another Working in Tech episode. We're starting to turn up the heat. It's now back to back to back to back to back sessions, and you're going to be seeing a lot more of this. And the goal, again, as always, is always to bring you a lot of value from people who work in the industry, giving you game on how you can also break into tech. My biggest passion, my biggest goal, and I think a lot of the people I bring on as well, is to see more people who look like us succeed in this industry. Again, the goal is to bring you that free game. And today I have an amazing guest with me. I'm going to be telling you more about him in a second. Bobby McNeil is an experienced talent acquisition manager with over a decade of delivering successful recruitment strategies for Fortune 500 companies. His expertise lies in identifying top talent across various roles, including software engineering, corporate IT functions, and even non-technical positions. Today, what I'm really hoping to get, from this conversation, one is his career journey, because I know that not even everybody who comes here wants to be a software engineer or a product manager. So maybe you want to be a talent person in tech. He's going to be giving away strategies that help him build his career to this point. But it's almost like a double entendre, right? Because you're also going to be getting that sneak peek insight into what it takes to go through successfully a talent person to get to the money, essentially, and what they're going to be looking out for. Actually, interesting. We're having that conversation. But before we get into all of that, welcome to the show, Bobby.
Hey, what's up, man? How's it going, man? Glad to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I know that you've recruited across many industries, both tech and non-tech. So my first question to you is going to be in two parts. Why did you get into the talent space, into recruiting, and why was tech also an avenue for you in that journey?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I think you'll hear a lot of like recruiters or a lot of like talent acquisition people say I kind of just fell into it, and that's typically how it happens, right? Talent acquisition and recruiting, it's a function of human resources, right? So you kind of just fall into it because you have the soft skills, the intangible skills. So I was a college basketball player, played at a high level. Probably see some of my memorabilia here in the background. And right after college, I really was trying to decide what I wanted to do, right? And I knew I wanted to do something in business, right? Always a star athlete, but I was also always very, very smart and very intelligent and tuned into kind of what I wanted to be. I was always thinking about, life after the sport, whether it ended in college or it ended in professionally somewhere. And my first job actually, was really just being a recruiting assistant, right? So that's kind of how I fell into it. I liked it because being a recruiter kind of really, or being in talent acquisition really puts you kind of in the middle of everything, right? It puts you right there between like the business and what's going on inside, but also gives you that exposure and that visibility to the candidates and the people that you're trying to help get jobs. So I kind of really like that, right? Kind of being that bridge or that liaison. um I got into tech recruiting, one because it was just interesting. I loved the audience when you're recruiting. You're talking to different people, and it was just always interesting to hear about all these techies doing all these amazing things. I'll be, I mean, I remember earlier in my career, I'd be on the phone. I was like, "You built what? Like, you did what? Oh, that's crazy. You did this app." It was just intriguing, right? To really kind of hear about all the different things they were doing, no matter if it was like, data analysis or software engineering or, you know, looking at threats and cybersecurity. I just always was just really interested in what they were saying. And, I wanted to kind of make that transition to that industry because I just always found it was very fascinating. It's innovative. It was fast paced. The technology is always changing. Yeah, the problems are always the same, but the technology is always evolving. So I always saw, going into it being a non-technical person in the tech industry, it put me, in the midst of the techies and the people that are actually doing the day-to-day, technical work. But man, I got the chance to learn about, the business. So it put me in exposure to that. So I was just like right in the middle of it all. And I just, the tech industry, obviously, always innovative, always changing, lucrative, high exposure. So, that's how I really kind of got started in my career in recruiting. And that's how I really kind of, transfused into the tech industry.
That is amazing, and you touch on something that I think is really important because, definitely, of course, one of the greatest things about tech and working in tech is how quickly it can change your circumstance, right? Like it's one of the highest paying careers
Hmm.
that requires the least amount of hurdles to get into. But I think one part that's not very obvious, right, especially if you're even just learning about tech,
Hmm.
is that piece that you mentioned, the ability to create. I think, when a lot of people think about creativity, right, we think about like rappers who make music from absolutely nothing. And then, it tops charts, it breaks records, it does a lot of amazing stuff. There's so much magic. For example, like even if you think about the technologies like that we use on a day to day, like Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, right? We all kind of like know that founder story in the garage and then they build something. But that's really possible. Of course, it's not as simple as they oftentimes make it. But
Hmm.
if you have the skills and you get lucky, just the same way like you're making a record, you never know if it's gonna blow up. It's the same exact thing, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that you touched on that I think is so powerful. So, kind of like moving on to the next question is, you know, as you start to navigate into the industry, did you have a mindset shift, from kind of like recruiting for talent outside of tech and then recruiting for talent inside tech?
Yeah, so like when I first started, I was recruiting non-tech. Like I was not recruiting any technologists. I mean, early in my career, before I started, recruiting all these, very like high profile, highly technical roles. Man, I was recruiting, I mean, store managers, right? I was recruiting, accountants, right? And all those professions are great. But there was actually a learning curve for me in order for me to be a good technical recruiter, right? Because when you get on the phone as a recruiter, you're on a video interview with the candidate, you have to earn trust. And you have to earn trust with your candidate that, even the recruiters that I mentor or manage, one of the key things I say, you have to instill trust both ways. You have to instill trust with the candidates. You have to instill trust with the hiring managers. And one of the key things you need to do is learn some of the technology. It's great if you can do it, that's great, but you got to be able to at least talk about things at a surface level. I think technical recruiting is one of the obviously most lucrative recruiting professions you can have, but it's also the most challenging, because you do have to know something at a surface level about what a software engineer does, what a cybersecurity engineer does, what a BI analyst does, right? Because that's your credibility is based in that. I had to really sit down with technologists and the hiring managers I was working with, and actually had to sit in meetings and actually kind of go do some additional learning on my own, right? To understand exactly, okay, what am I going to be talking about when I go into this meeting with this hiring manager? I have to be able to go into this meeting and bring something at least tangible where it's like, okay, aha, I have a recruiter here. I have Bobby that knows what he's talking about. He knows the difference between front end, back end, full stack, right? He knows about penetration testing, some of the tools that we maybe use, offense, defense, he knows those things. So I had to like really kind of sit down with people, kind of, get that knowledge and get that information. I had to be curious, had to be inquisitive, and also had to go kind of like learn some things on my own. So that way I could build that trust and have a good reputation. The tech industry, I always kind of compare it to, and I compare a lot of things and, use a lot of metaphors with sports, because, that's why I played that most of my life. That was really my life before, I got into, this corporate thing. And it's a lot like sports. You always like, even in basketball, when I was playing, we always had to be working on our jump shot, always had to be working on our dribbling skills, footwork, pivots, always had to stay conditioned. And in the tech industry, it's the same way. You always have to be sharpening your skills. You always have to take the initiative to learn new things, right? And kind of learn new things on your own outside of what your employer may offer you. And just always be practicing and always be willing to learn so you can stay on top of your game.
And it's so powerful when you say that, for many reasons. That part about you know that relationship two ways. I've never been a hiring manager, so I didn't know that. But I was at a conference recently, and funniest story. Someone who tried to hire me for a position, like I think last year or 2 years ago, didn't quite work out. We had met at Afrotech, partied together, and then met again up at render in ATL.
Yeah, yeah, I love
and,
Renee. Yeah.
and we met again and kind of like deep in our bonds. And then he was telling me, because he was actually there out there recruiting, and
Mhm.
kind of like telling me challenges with like dealing with recruiters. Like he once had a recruiter once who wasn't really like meeting his needs, but then he starts to work with this great guy. And then it's amazing. Like as a candidate, I don't have any visibility into that. So as you say that now, it's very interesting to kind of like almost like a full circle in terms of like thinking about it. Because yes, like they would have needs, and then they need someone who can like work with them to quickly close that rack and things like that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so what would you say, as a recruiter has served you in terms of like your skill set? Because again, I think one of the things that I realize is, for many people who are new into tech, there's always a lot of focus, and rightly so, right, on the technical skills, the core skills that you need to do the job,
Mhm.
but maybe not enough on the things that you already bring.
Mhm.
Because I think everybody has a knack for something.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest, like, either advantages or disadvantages you can have, advantage will be in the sense of working on those things that you naturally have. Disadvantage will be having a set of skills and trying to do something completely different from that set of skills. Because it's like, it's almost like you're working against yourself. You're forcing yourself to do things that are not natural to you. So
Mhm.
for you, what were those things, whether you brought from like being an athlete, just your natural, you know, premonitions, right? That helped you, become one, a great recruiter, but most importantly, a great recruiter in tech.
Yeah, this is a great question because I'm actually writing about this right now in my book. I have a whole chapter really dedicated to this. So I think one of the key things, as an athlete, teamwork, like that's really important. I don't think you can't survive in any profession without being collaborative. I don't care what industry you're in. Being collaborative, understanding the importance of the role that you play, not only in your team, but also in the big picture, right?
Yeah.
Teamwork, communication. And communication, we talk about written communication, verbal communication. Also, listening is a communication mechanism as well.
Yeah.
So we always talk about communication being outward, communication is inward as well. Being able to
Yeah.
listen and retain information, right? And being able to comprehend, something that you definitely have to do as an athlete. You know, I mean, you think about, again, I'm gonna use basketball because that's the sport I played. There's a lot going on the court. There's a lot of conversation. You talking to your teammate over here, making sure that he knows that the pick is coming. You're communicating with your other teammate over here. Timeouts are called really quickly, and then you have to be in that huddle and you have to get the information quickly. So that's one thing I learned is how to get information quickly and also how to communicate things and analyze and to make quick assessments. That's something that is definitely important. That I took from the ball game to the tech game all the way to what I'm doing right now corporately. I think those things are key. Also, for any former athletes that are watching, never losing your competitive edge. I think that's going to be key. Never losing your competitive edge. I think it's okay to have a healthy sense of competition as long as it's not toxic. But a lot of your competition really is going to be within yourself, right? The person that you see every day in the mirror, trying to be better than you were the day before, trying to be more knowledgeable than you were a week before, trying to be, more valuable or more, um, just functional than you were last year, right? So always looking to up your game. When we talk about non-technical skills, I mean those essentially what we call transferable skills. But transferable skills are essentially just business skills. Skills that transcend every industry, every scope. It doesn't really matter what the specification or the function of the role is. They are skills and they're business skills and they're skills that are going to be needed regardless, right? Leadership, management, right? There's leadership and management are different. This is something, I'm in my third management position right now. I've been in the game for 16 years. This is my third, actually maybe fourth management position. I had to learn the difference between being a leader and being a manager. Is there some overlap in that? Absolutely. But, somebody can be a leader and not necessarily have the management title or management distinction, right? but they're still a leader, right? And then a manager is typically somebody who manages through direct autonomy, meaning they have specific resources or they have people that they manage, right? They're responsible for that. A leader is a leader through, you can lead through influence, right? Do you have an idea, and can you get people rallied around the idea to go to a common goal, right? So leadership, management, project management, being able to scope out a project and see it through from a concept to all the way to completion, and being able to manage all the little nuances in between that, being able to assess risk, being able to coordinate people together, being able to not only necessarily kind of nudge and tell people what to do, but also being able to be part of the solution to solve the problem too. So there's project management, data analysis, structured problem solving, and I want to put keyword structured, right? There's problem solving, then there's structured problem solving. Structured problem solving is what will get you to the next level. Like, how do you structurally go about taking a problem, analyzing it, and solving it, right? Like, like I even like used to recruit engineers a lot. They use like Six Sigma, methodology. That's like, there's a Six Sigma green belt, yellow belt, black belt, master black belt, DMAIC, all these different decision making processes, right? So those are some of those non-technical skills that, if no matter what industry you're in or no matter where you're trying to go, if you have some of those core fundamentals, they can take you far.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a really good one. I want to touch on the soft skills again, but I think there's something that I wanted to maybe you to share a bit of a light on. So I did have a bit of a frustration, and it's one of the things that motivates me to do this because there's so many kids who know about like sports and like know the pathway, but I feel like not enough who know about technology or are actively pursuing a career there. And for many reasons, like sports is on television, it's celebrated nationally and internationally. Like
Mhm.
sports stars are global, right? If there are only a handful of like unicorns in the US that's, tech companies that are valued over $1 billion that are privately held, that
Mhm.
are black owned. But I bet you if I ask the average kid who knows LeBron to tell me who the founders are or what those technologies are, they probably can't tell me. But I think in my conversation with, I think you're probably like maybe the second or third person who's actually played sports, who's on this show, and many I've talked to on the back end. I've realized that it's not necessarily a either or, right? And I
Mhm.
think you touched on that because there's so many things that you learn, right? About discipline, about delayed gratification, about patience. Because when you're sitting on the bench, it's not fun, right?
It's not.
Teamwork, like you said, that can be extremely useful, extremely valuable, right, in becoming, you know, a technologist in some role. First of all, maybe your perspective on how, more kids, more black kids can get, maybe not away from sports, but combine technology and figure out ways to, in case that doesn't work, this is a channel, right? That's one. But then two, how to leverage that natural desire of being already like very competitive people to succeed in this industry.
Yeah, I've always said that, my dream was to go to the NBA, just like
Mm.
every young black kid, that plays sports or does something, right? I'll fully admit that, right? But I think my parents, what they really instilled in me, they wanted that dream for me too, right? Whatever you want to do, you can do, right? But I think also we had, a lot of really good conversations early on, is that use sports as a way to strengthen skills, use sports as a way to build your character, right? Another thing I learned from sports is how to deal with highs, how to deal with lows, how to deal with successes, how to deal with challenges, right? Not getting too high when things are going real well, but not getting too low when things aren't going so well, right? That builds character. It helps you develop thick skin. It helps you to take pretty constructive criticism on the fly. Your coach is going to tell you if you did something wrong, and he might not tell you in the nicest way, but it'll get you prepared for life. And I think a lot of times, if we look, it's okay to have a dream to be an NBA athlete or NFL football player. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But look at it more holistically when your kids are playing sports. Look at it more holistically. What can they get out of this to help to develop their character? What can they get out of this to help develop them as a man or as a woman? What can they get out of these tools or these life lessons that they'll learn on the field or on the court that can help them immediately and help them in their life later on? And I think that's one of the key things that I did. Everybody's not going to be LeBron. Everybody's not going to be that. And I want us to know that that's okay. And I think a lot of times when we, don't become that, we think we failed. And you have not. You can still have a very impactful life, and you can still be very impactful in your community. You can still be very impactful across the world and not do that. If you want to do that, that's great. And God bless you on your journey, but understand that you can be, a software engineer in your city and have an impact in your community. You can be, a cybersecurity engineer, and you can have an impact in the geography that you live in, and you can make an impact with the youth that way. There's a lot of different pathways in life, as young African American people, to make an impact outside of sports and music. Those things are great, but understanding that you can have a very lucrative career, you can live a very high quality of life, and you can make an impact in this world doing other things. And having a lot of conversations with people about how to even get into tech. And I want to just say this, this might sound funny, but I don't really like the term breaking into tech. I don't like it. I've said this before on other platforms. I've said this before at speaking engagements, but it bears repeating. And I know we use that term a lot. That seems like we're the only community that really uses that term psychologically all the time about breaking in. I don't like that term because it implies that you're trying to gain access to somewhere that you don't belong. And I think, and I've said this before, and, if somebody's watching, they've heard me say this before. I think what we do is that we develop this like psychological superstructure in our head, and it plays into our imposter syndrome. Because think about it, if you're breaking into something, you're trying to get somewhere that you really don't belong. And I think that as long as you have the drive, as long as you have the skills, you can be in any industry you want to be in. And I would love for us, it may not happen soon, but I would love for us to just kind of, put that banner up in the rafter and just kind of retire that. Because we're the only community that uses it in preponderance like that, like consistently. And as somebody who's been doing this was, about 15, 16 years, and I talked to a lot of people, and a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life, a lot of genders, races, other countries. I've recruited people in other countries. I've recruited in Mexico, Canada. I've recruited in Brazil. I've recruited in England. I've recruited in every state here in the US. And from what I've seen is that we use that term a lot. And, I think it's just time to kind of get rid of that, because you can gain access to any industry. And I think, it's just something that I think it just kind of plays into, kind of our doubts about ourselves. So, yeah. So I'll just leave it at that.
I really wish you luck on your campaign of retiring that phrase.
Yeah, I know.
Because I see a lot of people married to it. But I think you do make a great point, though. You do make a great point. I think it kind of like it goes along with one of my core beliefs is that, you have to believe. It's funny that people talk about imposter syndrome. I've always thought that I have the opposite of that, where like rather than see like challenges, I tend to see opportunity. And then oftentimes there's a little not arrogance, but overconfidence, like in a way that, I think the biggest thing that I could use to explain that was, Muhammad Ali's quote, and it stays with me even almost every day. Like, I'm the greatest. And I said that before I knew I was. It's like seeing yourself. I think, a lot of the new kids like to call it manifestation, right? But
Yeah.
it's like already believing that you are the thing, right?
Yeah.
Rather than trying to become the thing. Because I think it's a slight change, but a really important one, right?
Mhm.
Because I think there's a different energy. If you think about it, like if you believe that you're the greatest player or the greatest this or the greatest that, the day that if you believe you're the regular guy or you believe you're the greatest, if you're the regular guy, the day that you struggle a little bit, you're gonna be like, damn, I'm really not that good. But if you think you're the greatest, the day that you struggle, you're gonna think, damn, I'm letting myself down.
Yeah.
Right? And you were not even that to begin with, right? And
Right.
and that's something I've even seen, right? A lot of young people, which is there's a reason why, there was something that someone said to me one time that I found very fascinating. It says 20-year-olds can entertain 40-year-olds, but 40-year-olds can never entertain 20-year-olds. I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, I've never thought of that. And
Yeah.
it's very simple. When you're 20, you think that you're indestructible.
Mhm.
Like you're the most reckless that you can ever be in your life because you don't see obstacles, you don't see challenges. But as you tend to grow older, you like life starts to humble you, in many different ways.
Yeah.
And you kind of like tone it down a little bit more.
Right.
But I think to your point, it's more believe that you're that person, believe that you're in the moment.
Right. And again, I know I'm probably in the minority with that because I know that's a term that we plastered on t-shirts. It's great. And I understand why we feel that way, right? But oftentimes how we feel and what's real are two totally different things, right? And I think a lot of times we play into a lot psychologically on how we feel. But what's really in front of us is the mission and the goal. And I understand why we may feel that way because it does seem as if it's a very um you know it seems like it's an obstacle. It seems like it's a
Mm,
mountain to climb. But I think one of the key things the reason why I've been successful in life. And I've been a academic scholar. I graduated with honors. I lived on the honor roll when I was in school. I graduated cum laude from Barton College. I won an NCAA national championship. I've done a lot of great things in my career, and I don't say that to brag. I say that to say that is because I was always confident in every room I walked in. I didn't feel like I had to break
mm,
anything.
mm,
I felt like when any room I walked in, I was prepared for it. I was called for that season, and I walked in the room like I belonged there. I never felt like I had to break into anything. The preparation
mm,
and the grace that God had in my life, I had a grace when I walked in the rooms. I never felt like I had to break into anything. I
mm,
did the work in high school to get a academic scholarship in college.
mm.
I didn't walk on Barton College campus like, oh, I broke into. No, I did the work to get here. And I'm
Eh,
confident in that. And one more thing, like even like in college, I was a hooper here in North Carolina. When I walked onto that court in college, I felt like I belonged there. When I came into
mm,
recruiting and when I elevated into these rooms and I was in these rooms with these VPs and the C-level people and hiring managers asking me questions about candidates. And when I started recruiting tech, I feel like I belonged there. I didn't feel like I had to break
mm,
in. I was ushered in.
mm,
That's what I mean by that. Be confident, stand like walk in with your back up and your shoulders straight, and you here for a reason, and just I just
mm.
want us to be confident in that, and that's what the whole breaking into to tech thing is. Again, no shade on anybody who loves that term. I cringe a little bit when I hear people that I'm trying to help out say it.
I'm trying to break it in
Yeah,
tech.
yeah, yeah. So that's all that I feel really passionate about that. I don't want to be too long-winded on that, man. But I just want us to just believe in ourselves and not psych.
Okay, okay, but there's one more question I'll ask. It's a very interesting one, so I'll try to frame it in the best way that I can.
Mhm.
Um, I think that theme that you talk about playing to something that I think about a lot, and um, you know, let me put it this way because I know like it's something that's under attack. It was a highly debated subject like 2 3 months ago. DEI.
Mhm.
I've seen the arguments for it. I've seen the arguments against it, and to be honest, I'm very confused. right, in the middle. Because on the one hand, right, you see certain things play out. For example, I think it was a story trending a couple of days ago where a guy applied to the role, the same resume, two different names, and then one got called back, another one didn't. I think it's a story that we've heard multiple times. So then, for that reason, you definitely want bias to be taken away. But I seen a video one time where literally what you were describing, this lady, she went to a school that wasn't like a top school, right, for high school. So there was some like extracurricular that she would have had access to in a higher school that she didn't get. But she did a lot of community work and things like that, and many things. And when this interviewer was speaking to her and saying, do you feel like you would have gotten into the school without affirmative action, right? She says no, she couldn't have gotten it. When literally the evidence that she presented showed that she earned the right to be there. And it's so funny, like how much role even little mindset shifts like that, because there's going to be certain rooms that you walk in that you're going to keep quiet. Not because you're not as smart as people there, but you believe in your heart that you don't, not maybe you don't deserve to be there, but it took some extra effort. And there's people who actually don't have, maybe they're not even as talented as you are, and believe 10 times over. Maybe their uncle brought them in, right? Maybe their uncle brought them in and gave them like some referral, whatever, but they believe it. But you that you worked every single thing to get there, almost doubt yourself. So I think that touches on a little bit on the thing that you were talking about. Can you share, like, does that play into you thinking that way, to for more Black people to actually have that belief that if we find ourselves in situations that we work hard to be there, we should actually believe that we should be there?
Yeah, and I've seen us, walk into rooms with our heads so high in other places, but I don't know why in these particular rooms we don't want to be. Like we're very, bold people. We've accomplished a lot in our history. So it just puzzles me is that like we want to be selective where we want to be confident. And what you're talking about when you go into these rooms, I've done that in my career. But it's called having a high EQ. It's just called having emotional. That's really what it is. Like I said, there's no room that I feel like if I'm in that room, I'm in that room for a reason. Just by my faith, right? And just by my confidence, right? I have something to bring. Sometimes the thing I have to bring is silence, because it's just having emotional intelligence. Sometimes it's called reading the room. Sometimes when you read the room and you have that high level of emotional intelligence, then you have to have the discernment. Okay, this is when I need to speak up, and this is when I need to listen and take surveillance and gather information. That's what it is. Just because you see me somewhere and I'm silent, don't mean I'm not confident. I'm taking inventory. And that's what I said earlier. Communication is not always talking. Sometimes it's listening. Sometimes it's gathering information. So if you see me and I'm the only brother in there, I'm not intimidated at all. I'm there. Look, and sometimes it's gonna have to take me like stepping up and speaking up on behalf of my people. Sometimes it's gonna have to be me stepping up and speaking up on something that I know I have a subject matter expertise in, like recruiting and talent acquisition. And I know, okay, this is a period, this is a point in this room. This is a moment where my
It
voice,
calls for my
right. But then there's gonna be other times where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sit right here and I'm gonna look everybody dead in their eye because I'm gathering information. It's knowing when to speak and when to not speak. Right. And sometimes there's power in silence. And the loudest person in the room, not always, if you get what I'm saying. So no matter if I'm in a room full of people that look like me, sometimes I'm gonna talk, and then sometimes I'm just going, hey, I'm taking intel and I'm gathering information and I'm being observant. And then I'm going back to the strategy and I'm going back to the drawing board. And then I'm going to execute that way. No matter what room I'm in, I can be in a room with a whole bunch of people that don't look like me, I can be in a room with a whole bunch of people that do look like me. I can be in rooms with my family during the holidays, and even with your own family. Sometimes when you're in the room, sometimes you gotta know when to talk, and sometimes just to sit back and listen, and not always assume that you can't learn nothing in those rooms. Because I've learned things from people who don't even have as much experience as me. So also having that, like, again, this all ties into emotional intelligence. I've learned some things from recruiters that don't have 16 years in the game, but that's okay. They may have 5 years in the game, but what they did in that 5 years is very impactful. So I have to be able to kind of have that intelligence. Like, I'm gonna sit here and listen to what she got to say right now. I can learn something. So does that make sense? Like,
It makes absolute sense. And I think you touch on even something else that's so important. I made a tweet, I think last week or this week, that said something like, you have to be able to like take feedback from every direction. If you only aspire to take feedback from the people above you, it shows that a certain level in your career, when you get to that point, you can no longer grow because you've never learned to be able to like multi-directional in the way that you receive feedback. And even if you think about it, like you can be, even if you know everything, let's say you do, which is impossible, you might not be connected. How about that? So, because that's where you hear things like, what are these streets saying, right?
Yeah.
That's what it means, because you're no longer connected to the streets anymore.
Yeah.
So now you gotta lean on your connect in that sense. So it's the same thing. Like as a leader, you can grow in your career so much. If you're not connected to the foot soldiers, the people who are doing the work on a daily, then you're gonna lose that touch. And that moment is priceless because you so high up. Like imagine you're a senior leader with like 4 or 5 people reporting into you. I don't care how much you want to do it, you're not going to be connected. You're not going to be in those hallways. You're not going to be in those back offices, right? And you still want to know what's going on there, because oftentimes those are the people carrying your big, organizational goals. Those are the people executing. So you still have to be connected. But kind of like to switch gears a little bit, right?
Okay.
As someone who's recruited talent, at different times, technical talent specifically, right? What are some of the things, because a lot of people, as the show is called Working in Tech, a lot of people are trying to get into this role, product management, software engineers, things like that. As someone who's looked at, I imagine now maybe like at least 100,000 resumes, right? What are the things
every day? Go ahead.
What are the things that stand out to you from a resume perspective? Let's start from there. That a candidate has to have in order to pique your interest.
This is a topic that's widely discussed. Again, this is something I'm mentioning in my book as well. But let's not even before we get to like buzzwords and keywords and all that, can we just like format? Like, it got to be readable. Like, what I'm saying? Like, I think that's the first thing. Like, there's a study that like I think recruiters spend at least like 6 to 10 seconds looking at your resume in like a Z fashion, right? Within that 6 seconds, like they're looking like the organization. Like, is your resume organized? Like, I've seen some resumes in my career where it's just not easy to read, right? It's just not, right? So format is important, right? You think about, and I've said this before, I kind of use the same metaphor. It's like, you look at the human body, like your spine, right? Your body, right? You got to have good posture, right? And when you have good posture, things are aligned where they need to be. Same thing with a resume. Your resume has to have good posture. Things have to be kind of where they need to be. So I think the first thing is just being able, it needs to be readable and digestible from a format standpoint. I always say this: you want to focus on impact and not so much on responsibilities. There's so much, we don't want to, you don't want to have a resume and just got the job description. Like we know that. I want to know what impact you made. Did you solve some problems? Did you save the company money? Did you make the company money? Is something that you created? Is it, did you do a process improvement? Did you do a continuous improvement? Right? What about your work that you did that helped take the department or the company to the next level, right? I think a lot of reasons why a lot of times people don't put that because they don't count their wins. They don't count their successes, right? Anytime you accomplish something on the job, you should be taking, if you get any kudos or any feedback or get any shout outs, you should be taking that information and you should be storing that somewhere personally for yourself, right? You should just always be collecting your wins, always counting your wins. And I think that's a lot of problem. A lot of the problem is that when people go and start to update their resume, they don't have that, right? So you should always be storing that away. So when it's time to build your resume for that next application, you can put those things in there, right? So impact, I think that's going to be key. I think those are really, that's really the main thing really that I see. I want to see what impact you made. I want to see measurables. I want to see something quantitative. When I do sessions with hiring managers, that's what they want to see. And these are my partners. Like I have partners both ways. The candidates are my partners, but the hiring managers are my partners as well. And I'm trying to bring both together. And the way you bring both together is I want to see you come in and do well, right? And because when they see that on your resume, that's going to make them want to continue the conversation with you in the interview. I like what he did. I like what she did here. I want to get them on the phone to talk about that. If you don't have impact on your resume, they're chomping at the bit. I can't wait to get on the phone to talk to Bobby McNeil and how he built this recruitment process and had these efficiencies. That's what I need on my team. So that's going to be the thing that's going to get them excited, right? And that's the thing you need to talk about in the interview is what you did there, right? So that's really one of the key things, that I see day to day.
And I was privy to like hearing someone talking to like a leader about some potential resumes. And, she was like breaking down, there's this many candidates who come from externally. There are this many referrals. There are this many internal candidates. And then the pitch goes up like, oh, you know what? There's this person who's so exciting. She's great. She has da, 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 da. And then she goes on, right? What makes a candidate have that kind of impact on you as a recruiter?
Like even like when recruiters, when we go through applications, we're looking at resumes, like I said, that impact is going to make me want to talk to them, right? Because what I hear my hiring manager say is that, Bobby, I need somebody to come in here and solve my operational problem. Or Bobby, I need somebody to come in here that's going to impact the bottom line positively, right? So that's what they need. They think about if you have a company and you're hiring, that's what you're going to want. And I think, helping candidates understand that, I think will kind of dispel some things that that make some nervousness or dispel some things that they may be going through in the interview. Like, so when I'm looking at a resume, I get excited about the impact that I see. So when I get on the phone, I get on a video interview with a candidate, I want them to talk about that. So then that's when I get into communication. Communication gets me excited about a candidate. You being able to talk about what you've done over the last year. You being able to talk about intuitively what you've done the last 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, however long you've done it. Because you don't want to just be good on paper. You want to be good on paper because that resume is important, because that's gonna make our eyes open wide. But when you can go into an interview and you can talk about what you did, and you don't look like you're reading off your resume or looking off to the side, or I don't see you like reading off of something, that shows passion. It's like, yeah, they know what they did and they can talk about it. They can walk me through it. They can help me paint a picture as I'm sitting here talking to them. That's going to be like, yo, I got to submit you to the hiring manager like right now, because you're going to solve his or her problem. So that's really what it's all about. Can this person solve? I've been a hiring manager because I've hired recruiters. I manage people now. And, even when I've been the hiring manager, and I've had somebody recruit for me, that's really what I just want. Like, can they come in here and solve this problem? I'm doing two people's work. I'm doing my manager work and I'm doing this individual's work. I need somebody I can trust that can just take it and do it And that's what they're looking for. Can you solve my problem? Can you get some of this weight and burden off me on my team? And that's really what this person, the person on the other end of the interview is a person just like you. So don't be so intimidated because they're on the phone with you because they need your skill set. They need you. If you made it to the phone interview, if you made it to the interview, you got what it takes. It's just the battle is just getting across the finish line, right? So just understand that if you're going into an interview, you're there for, like I said, you're here for a reason, right? You got what it takes, and you on the phone or in a video interview with somebody who's human just like you, that got a problem operationally that they're trying to solve, or they're trying to hire somebody that's going to impact the bottom line in a positive way, and you can do that, and they want to be able to hear that. So
That's facts. That's facts. You say something that I want to touch on again. So, interviewing is something that's important. So you touched on resume, you've touched on interviewing a little bit, but I want to go back there. I think, it took me so long, and I wouldn't even say I'm an expert at it right now, is that, as someone who can be a little long-winded and verbose, I've realized that I've done myself a lot of harm in interviews more than I realized, because one of the things I start to recognize as I, grow in my career is that once you understand some things to a certain extent, you talk about it with a level of ease. And even if you understand it, but you're struggling, it doesn't come off as you being an expert. So, and there's so many things, especially, so there's two almost extremes that I see. If you lie on your resume and you've not really done it, you can struggle. If you've actually done it, you can also struggle. Why? Because you have too much information that you've not been able to process what's the most impactful information to give to that person. Understanding that they know nothing about your team, they do nothing about the project, they knew nothing about the personas in that thing, and they probably don't even know the problem statement. I think that this is why, like, the STAR method, the CAR method, all of those things are very important, because those are frameworks that can help you pass it out. But if we put the frameworks to the side, how does a candidate come in an interview and share that value in a way that's very clear? That when you look at that resume, you don't say, nah, they're lying.
Okay. So your first interview with the recruiter is probably going to be your easiest interview. Because the recruiter, really what they're trying to do is just get surface level information, right? Just trying to make sure, like, okay, can this person communicate what they have here, right? So at that interview, you really want to just, the way you want to prepare for that is really, just real easy small things that can make a big impact. Like, really, go to the company website, find out a little bit about the business. You don't have to write a whole book report or thesis statement on the company, but know something. When you're going into the recruiter interview, know something, know about the company. Even if it's like, know about the product, right? Even like for people that's in the finance industry or in fintech, go look at their quarterly report. Just go look at it. You don't have to memorize it, but, like, okay, know what happened in Q3. Just know a little bit, right? Go on LinkedIn and look at some things, see if you can find some information about their culture. I mean, just things like that, right? And then, that's when you go into the interview, be able to talk about that and how that fits. You know what I'm saying? So, like, do that. Then when you go to the actual interview itself with the hiring manager, that's going to be more like in depth. That's when you got to do like the STAR method. You know what I'm saying? Because that's going to be more behavioral based. That's going to be more like, tell me about a time when. So I don't, STAR method, is an acronym, situation, task, action, result. I like to add an extra R. It's called, reflection. So being able to prep ahead of time and being able to understand, like, I'm going to have to tell a story, right? So a lot of times that's really what it is. They're going to actually tell me about a time when this, tell me about a time when that. Typically, your recruiter will probably tell you the things you need to do to prepare, and they should, because they should be trying to open doors for you and not necessarily trying to gatekeep, right? So understanding that and being able to at least tell that story. I find that, a lot of times the communication piece is not that necessarily you need to come off like a perfect candidate, because no candidate is perfect, or come off like a know-it-all. You need to be able to communicate, and being able to effectively communicate what you do know, but also being able to effectively communicate what you don't know. And I think that's a lot of times people look for that as well. I mean, I think a lot of times candidates think that, okay, if I communicate something that I say I don't know something, that's a weakness or that's going to hurt me. No, that's actually sometimes that's a good thing, because it shows that you have awareness.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're coming up on questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them on the chat. I have one final one for you, and then we'll go to the audience questions right after that.
Okay.
So, you worked at AWS, right? That's a company that basically the cloud leader, right? I imagine like recruiting in that company must be challenging. What were
Mhm.
some of the challenges that you faced in that role, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think I mean there's challenges in every role. I think that, the challenges I had as a recruiter anywhere are the same challenges everywhere, right? I think sometimes you as a recruiter you have to deal with the different markets, right? Sometimes the market is up, sometimes the market is down, right? As far as the job, the job market and the talent and things like that. So being able to come up with like creative ways and creative strategies to really connect with candidates, especially, people in the tech sector, right? So being able to do that, whether it's, going to events or going to conferences, or just, kind of building those relationships with people from other parts of the world.
Mm,
I think, that could be definitely a challenge. Also, just like I said, like always learn, you're always continuously learning the technology, right? The technology that you're recruiting for, right? And just being up to date on what's going on. You can learn those things, from working with different partners in the business, or you can just continuous learning on your own, right? Because things are always changing, right? So that I think that was definitely a challenge, not only there but just everywhere, right? Also, just like again, kind of being kind of caught in the middle, kind of being that liaison, right? Understanding what's going on in the business and how the candidate, whatever candidate you hire is going to affect that and impact that, right? I think those are all things, no matter, no matter wherever company I worked at, right? And I think that's just kind of what comes with the territory, which is being a recruiter.
amazing. Okay, so our first question is, how much can someone expect to make in their first tech recruiting job?
I'd say entry level. I mean, I will say this: the tech recruiter job or the recruiting job has evolved a lot over the years, right? I think the salaries starting off for recruiters now are way higher than they were when I was starting off back in, I don't know, 09, 2010. So entry level, I think, depending on the industry, like the tech industry, for example, you could probably start off probably anywhere between 80, 90,000 entry. At the senior level or principal level, I mean, you can make upwards to probably maybe 130, at the senior level or principal level, starting off, right? Kind of in that space. But entry level is kind of just getting in. I think, probably around the 80, 90K range is pretty solid.
Great. Um, Again, if you have more questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. I'm gonna go and ahead and ask another one. You know, how do you how do you deal with I think one of the things that I've seen is the frustration that candidates feel, right?
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
know that as a recruiter, you have yours too. But how would you advise someone who's kind of like going through like multiple job rejections to kind of like navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it definitely can be tough and be frustrating. I've even myself have been a job seeker before. So, I think I can really, kind of relate to that, right? I've not always been, gainfully employed. I've had some gaps in my career just like everybody else. I think that, there's a lot of reasons lot of outside factors that may come into play that has nothing to do with you personally, right? As to why you may have not gotten a call back or may have not landed a role. Obviously the job market, if it's a tight job market, it's just going to be more competitive. Kind of understanding that. But I know there are different frustrations and I know different things that are kind of going on with that. Also just, just kind of having a lot of anxiety around like actually applying, right? There's a lot of hope in behind the application. Even when I was going through my own job journey, I was like, hey, I think I'm a great fit for this job. I'm applying, and it's disappointing to get, that rejection letter back. But one thing I always try to do, and even some of my fellow recruiters that I really respect and admire, we always try to make sure we're you know opening doors for people, or at least providing some insight, and just being truthful and honest, throughout the process. But um, you know, those things are going to come, but the role that's meant for you is going to be yours. So
Mm, absolutely.
yeah.
So, how different is another question, audience question, how different is recruiting work from HR work?
Yeah, so the way I look at talent acquisition and recruiting, it's the marketing side of HR, right? And in some companies, the way they structure it, talent acquisition is totally separate from HR, right? But they put it, in the HR umbrella because it deals with people, right? Human resources, right?
Mm,
Because there's like front end, back front end HR, and there's back end HR. Like front end HR is like,
mhm,
talent acquisition. I always call it the marketing side of recruiting. We're out there trying to bring people into the company, right? We're
mm,
at the conferences, we're at the tech events, we're at the career fairs, right? We're talking about, our talent branding, our employer branding, right? It's about bringing people
mm,
in. So I always look at it like that. The back end HR stuff is like, benefits, employee relations, employee investigations, and things like that. If things unfortunately go wrong, I don't deal with that side. I actually don't like that side. Because it's that's just kind of, I don't deal with that. Sometimes I have to work with them cross functionally, as partners. But when you talk about recruiting, it's the marketing side. It's we got all the swag, the t-shirts, all the swag that we take to the conferences and things like that. So me personally, I look at recruiting as the fun side of HR, because it's all about getting you in and getting you paid and getting you the things that you need. You know what I'm saying? So
and once you get in, you got to go deal with all the problems. I'm joking.
not me. I ain't doing that. I'm the
I'm
person you
joking.
come to. I'm the person you come to if you got a friend you're trying to put on. You come talk to me. You got a referral. I'm trying to get them in. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Like when you said HR, I was almost looking. I can say HR isn't your friend, and then you said that because there was a post I made too, like a short while ago about about the fact that understand that HR works for the company, not really for you. Because I think some people get it twisted where, for example, let's say there's an issue, they don't go buttoned up, to HR with the issue, right?
Mhm.
They maybe because in their mind it's like this is a friend or they're gonna take care of me, like an attorney. But no, like their number one job is to protect the company. So
Mhm.
if you show weakness in that first engagement, then it can and will be used against you.
Yeah, that's interesting because like everybody is working for the company, not just HR. Everybody's trying to protect the
Well,
company.
that's
If
true.
you if you
That's
work in
true.
sales, you're trying to sell. Not only you trying to get your sales number, but you're trying to sell on behalf of your company, the company you work for,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
If you work in IT, like we're talking about working in tech, you're protecting the company. If you handling all these cybersecurity threats, aren't you protecting the company that you're working with? You're working for the
It
company.
is true.
So yeah, it's just like, I find that, I find that kind of amusing. Like every department in any large corporation is trying to protect the company, not just HR.
No, but I think what I kind of like mean, and I don't even want to spend too much time on it. It's like, in that case, for example, let's say you work in cybersecurity, you already know who the anti is, right? It's anybody who's malicious, who's trying to solve, who's trying to maybe take advantage. But in this case, you probably have an issue between an employee who's probably like the colleague and maybe like a leader or a manager, right? Oftentimes, the colleague is going to think like it's fair representation or equal representation, right? But it
Mm,
oftentimes is not. I think that's what I'm alluding to, like because it's definitely your part, their part, and the company's part, right? So
mm,
it's not as balanced, right? Like you're not going in front of a judge. You say, "I'm looking at two sides." I think with HR, what I'm saying more than anything else is that it's three parts. So you have to consider that.
mm.
It's just like it's kind of like the perspective I was trying to bring. But I think we have another question that says, "How can I transition from higher education recruiting to tech recruiting? As someone who's been in multiple recruiting roles, I think this is going to be a great question.
So going from like doing non technical recruiting to doing tech recruiting.
Yeah, yeah.
The way I made the transition, honestly, this is how I did it. So I'll just and it worked out for me. I actually first took like a kind of recruiting support role in tech. That
Mm,
way, I strategically aligned myself next to the tech recruiters, and also was put in rooms and conversations and meetings with actual like hiring managers and supportive recruiting teams. Because
mm,
it was important for me to spend that year kind of learning all of that information, right? Because when you're doing tech recruiting, you do have to know a little bit about the tech industry and kind of what the audience that you're talking to, and who you're screening on the phone, right? So it could, because you have to, as a recruiter, you have to earn trust with the candidates too. It's not always just about earning trust with the hiring manager. You have to earn trust with the candidates too. They got to feel like they're on the phone with a competent recruiter that's asking them the right questions, right?
mm,
Like you don't want to be sitting there, asking questions about front end when the job is specifically back end, right? And an intelligent candidate in the tech end, they can tell that, right? So for me, it was important to really kind of align myself kind of in there and kind of learn about that, right? Another thing, another thing also that might be helpful is if every company has some sort of technical component, right? The tech industry really kind of is everywhere, right? No matter if I worked in med
mm,
tech, fintech, every company has tech. So, you may be recruiting on, all sales positions, or you may be working on, recruiting on marketing positions. That may be your designation. But, maybe take an opportunity to volunteer and work on a few of the tech roles that your company may have, whether it's, like, a IT help desk role, or a systems admin role, or a
mm,
Salesforce administration position, right? So, you know,
mm.
like taking the opportunity to kind of look at that scope and kind of kind of get involved that way too.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yep.
I definitely, I think just how I bring it home, you talk about something that's so important. I've heard so many guests say it, so I'm just going to append it to that really great advice.
Hmm.
There's going to be so many opportunities to connect your idea, your opportunity, the things that you're trying to do in tech that may not be direct the role that you want. Find that opportunity to connect to that role through like an adjacent opportunity supporting someone else. I think that would also be a great way.
Hmm.
Um, we're coming to the end of the show. I know you talk about the book. I don't know if there are any things that you want to talk about. Oh, by the way, you're also the president of Blacks in Tech. I completely forgot that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But maybe this is kind of like the outro. So tell us more about the book. Plug any other thing that you want to plug, and let's kind of like bring it to a close.
Yeah, so I'm in the process right now of writing a book. I'm actually almost finished. Much of the book is already in editing and beta reading, but it's called Cracking the Code, and it really talks about the 10 kind of common mishaps in kind of somebody's like career journey or job seeking journey, but also provide steps on how to overcome those, right? So, the book, we talk about resumes, we talk about transferable skills, we talk about, the job market. But we basically kind of reverse engineer it, right? So the book really gives you the reason, but then I also provide solutions, tangible solutions on how to I kind of overcome some of those pitfalls that somebody may be experiencing in their job search. So there'll be studies in there. There'll be definitely real kind of examples that people can digest, but it's also somewhat autobiographical, where I kind of give some examples in my personal life, not only in my career as a recruiter, and kind of how I've elevated in some of the things I've seen, but also like some of my own job search woes as well throughout my life and throughout my career. So that's hopefully we're going to be able to drop the book before the end of the summer. It's my first book. I'm a first time author. I think it's going to be very helpful. Some of the things we already touched on here, but I think it's going to be really good. Also, I am, one of the leaders of Blacks in Technology Foundation. Blacks in Technology is, basically the largest global organization fully dedicated to increasing the representation of Black people in the tech industry, right? So global organization. We have about just over 80 chapters in 20 countries. And I'm the chapter president for Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. Currently, we have about probably 860 members. We have a conference coming up called BitCon. It's going to be in Atlanta this year. So it's going to be amazing. Last year at our conference, the Raleigh-Durham chapter, we won the Impact Award for being the most impactful chapter, not just in the United States, but in the world, right? And there were only four, I think there was only four chapters that walked away with an award, and we were one of them. So membership is free. We want to keep the barrier of entry low. There's, basically the benefits of membership is that if you become a member of Blacks in Technology, obviously it's free, but you get, access to, AWS certifications, Google certifications, all these different certifications and boot camps for little to no cost. So, and then also we provide networking opportunities. Every chapter pretty much in the US has networking opportunities and events. And that's what we provide. Some of our events are tech talks. Some of our events are networking and mixers. Some of them are just social gatherings. But long story short, we just want to provide a community for people.
Wow, that is amazing. Winning on, off the court, and winning for the community. That's amazing, Bobby.
Yeah.
Like, it's really great to have you to share your insights. Now I'm thinking about joining Blacks in Technology. I think you're the second person from the organization that I've had on. I definitely, because I like community, especially like doing the important work that you're doing and they're doing. And I think that's game for everybody else too. So if you're new or trying to get into tech and you're looking for a community, I think Blacks in technology is definitely like a great one to check out. Thank you so much, Bobby, for coming. This has been amazing rocking with you this past hour. Thanks everyone else for joining us as well. We're going to be back next week again with another exciting episode of the Working in Tech with a different guest talking about a different topic. That's our show for tonight. Bye, everyone.